Studio One's analog delay. We can access the analog delay by pressing F7 on our keyboard, which will take us to the Effects tab, and then basically the second one here. These are by alphabetical order. The analog delay is here. We can click, hold, and drag that onto a track that we'd like to use it on. We can also, I'll F7 and close out the browser, select our track, press F4. Then we can see here our inserts, click on the plus symbol, and then we can also find the analog delay here. Now I've already got this loaded on my track, so I'll F4 and close out the inspector, and let's go ahead and take a look at some of the parameters of the analog delay. So let me just double click, close out that inspector. Now the analog delay is based on a one-head tape delay and will allow you to not only create unique delay types, but flanging and chorus type effects as well. And as always, we'll start in the upper left-hand corner and we make our way across the device, covering each parameter. So we've got our power to activate and deactivate. We have our bypass next to that. So if we've made some adjustments and then we'd like to hear our original audio, we can just click that to kind of turn those effects off for the moment without powering down the device. We have our area for storing and recalling our own personal presets rather. Then we have next to that an area with Studio One's included presets. So if you're new to delay, one thing that could be good to do is come through these various presets and just take note of how the different parameters below are adjusted to achieve the result that you'll hear with each of these presets. We then have an area for automation, and if you'd like to learn more about automation, just click on the link in the upper right hand corner here. We then have compare, copy, and paste. If we've made adjustments within this analog delay and we have another instance of analog delay within our song, we can copy, come to that other second instance, and then paste those settings into there. Now let's get to the good stuff here. First, we have time and beats below here, a control for that. And let's actually power off the device really quickly so we can hear our dry audio signal. I just have a snare that I've placed here on this track. So let's hear how that sounds dry. Pretty straightforward. I'm going to go ahead and activate the analog delay again. And then I'm going to take the feedback, which is set at 40% by default, all the way down to 0. And by doing so, this does not mean our delay effect is not going to be there. It's just going to be only one delay following our initial audio. And this is just going to help make very clear what the beats actually does here. And by default, we have sync activated, and this is basically going to sync our delay to the song tempo, which is currently 120 beats per minute. We can also disengage that and set an absolute value in milliseconds. And we have a range of 1 millisecond all the way up to 3 seconds. And I'm going to go ahead and just put that sync back on and come back to, I want quarter notes. We can also just click in this area here and then select from a value there. Quarter. So now I'm going to go ahead and play back. None of these other parameters are active at the moment. I'm going to take my mix up to 50% though. I'll go ahead and play back. So you can hear that we almost kind of have a flanging effect, and that second delay is falling on a quarter note. So if we were to count, I'll turn on the click track. 1 and 1 or rather 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4. So then if we were to take this down to say eighth, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and. So you get the idea here. If I were to come down to 16ths, that's going to be like 1E and 1E and 2. I can't do it, but anyway. One E and a 2 and a 3 and the tempo is way too high, but you get the idea here on how the beats work. Now, if we were to take up the feedback, And we can hear quite clearly that the delay is falling on those 16th notes. And we can get a really cool effect if we just take this all the way up. So you can do all sorts of sound design techniques with this. Take that click track off and stop playback. So that is the time and the beats there. Let's move on to speed. I'm going to take the beats back up to, say, let's go back to quarter. And the first parameter that we have here, factor, is going to allow you to modify the emulated tape speed, which will basically adjust how your delayed signal falls. So it's just going to change the timing on that a little bit. And the inertia is going to modify the speed of these changes over time. And with these current settings, we're not going to hear any effect with that. But the inertia really plays a part when we work with the LFO, which we're going to take a look at now. So I'm actually going to control click to set the factor back to 1. And any parameter that you'd like to reset, just hold Control or Command on the Mac and click on that parameter. Now the LFO section here is essentially going to allow you to add modulation to your delayed signal, and we have several modulation waveforms to choose from. We can click here at the top. We have triangle, sine, sawtooth, and square. The mod dial here modifies the effect of your LFO on the delay speed, and we have a range of -50% to 50%. We then have beats to sync up our modulation to the song tempo. And we can also engage or disengage our sync here. Again, if we take that off, then we can set an absolute value in hertz. I'm going to go ahead and reselect that. And let's come to, say, half a bar here. And I'm going to actually take the mod up a bit. And let's start playback. So you can hear quite clearly how that delayed signal is being modulated. And this kind of inverts it when we come to the left. Now, one thing to keep in mind if you're working with these parameters is that if we have sync engaged on the time and the LFO, and we change the beats to below what we have set here, we have this on quarter note. If I were to leave this at 8th note, then we're not going to hear a modulation effect on our signal. Unless we were to make use of this inertia. If I were to kick this up, okay, we can hear that now. Now, if I were to take this inertia back, and that goes away. So just keep in mind that the inertia is going to play a role within the LFO section here. And let's actually give a listen to a vocal track and hear how the LFO is going to modulate that. So I'm just going to mute our first track, solo our second. Let me bring up the delay for the vocal track, playback. So you can hear quite clearly how that modulation is working with our delayed audio signal. And I'm going to go ahead and control click on the mod to take that back to being at 0%. Let's move on to the damping. This is pretty straightforward. Our low cut here will filter out frequencies below whatever value that we have set here. And we have a range of 20 off, basically. And then we have 21 hertz all the way up to 3.2 kilohertz. So if I were to go ahead and play that vocal sample back, I'm going to put the loop on, come back to the beginning. Then we're going to be thinning out the delayed signal as we raise that low cut. If I drop it back down, our high cut, so you can hear that actually when I adjusted that after we stopped the track. And we'll go ahead and move on to feedback. And we've been working with this throughout the video, so that's pretty obvious. This is basically going to determine how much of our output signal is being sent back through the analog delay. We then have a width section, which is actually not active because we are working with a mono audio track for our vocals here. Now, if we were to come back up to the snare drum, which is a stereo track, we can see that this width then becomes active, and we also have an input section here that we can make use of. Let me go ahead and solo out our snare. Let me readjust this loop. And I skipped over boost here. Boost is basically going to simply boost your feedback levels. Now with the width, this allows you to set the stereo width of your delay feedback and works in tandem. As I just mentioned with the input controls here, we have left, center, and right. So let's go ahead and give a listen to how this works. So we're not going to hear much of a variation here because we have center as the input selected. If I were to choose left, you can even take a look at the meter here and see how this is going to have a ping pong effect left and right. You can also hear that. And basically the left and right determines whether that ping pong effect is going to start on the left or right. If I change to right, the panning just basically starts on different areas when we choose left or right. Come back to center. Then you can see we have not much variation on our meters here. We then have saturation, and this emulates tape saturation, and we can choose from a value of 0%, which is going to apply no effect to our signal, and we can take that up to 100%. Finally, at the end here we have mix, and this is basically going to give us the option to choose how much of our affected signal we want to include. So all the way up, we have 100% of our delayed signal, and then all the way to the left, we're going to have nothing but our dry signal. If I go ahead and play back, and that is our mix. So the analog delay is a simple and straightforward device, but you can still get some cool effects and do some sound design with this. So I hope that you've gained some useful information. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.